All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our December 2023 garden talk. Denise Knoll, one of our master gardeners, is going to talk about garden planning and organization today. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Jan. Hi, I'm Denise Knoll, and today we're going to talk. It's a good time to talk about planning for next season. So garden planning, how to stay organized through the process. I know people have different techniques that they do, but this is a few pointers just to kind of help you along the way, maybe new ideas, better tactics. Oh, I forgot this or that, but just to kind of help you along the way. So talking about, when we put together a plan, it helps us stay on track. It helps us, remind us of what our goals are as we go through the process, what we want to see for the next season. Okay. And helps us share that that all of our needs and everything that we're looking for out of our garden, whether it's flowers, you want to put new flowers in, natives, or you're just doing vegetables. This information could be used for any type of garden planning that you're looking at. Now it doesn't want to change again.
Oh, that's right. You gotta go down to the corner and find it.
All right. But you'll see in some of these pictures here why I'm trying to change the slide, that you can be as detailed with your plan and is spread out, and there's all kinds of different plantings, different size gardens. Was that it? There we go. Okay.
Is that it? That's your next one?
So some things to think about before you start looking at your planning for the next season. And I'll just talk a little bit about frost and freezes in the different, beginning and the end of the seasons and the weather patterns. Most of you already know that in 2003, they just updated the new weather, the hardiness zone map. Jay and I were talking a little bit about it. You see the interstate running through the middle of Genesee County. So north of us didn't change a whole lot, but the southern part of that kind of delineating line, we changed from, was it B? Yeah, to 6A. So, but still with the seasons changing, you might still have problems with 6A making it over the winter. So just be aware that a lot of times these change when they have more weather devices. They're taking more information in. There's more locations that they can get the averages from, and that's where they usually update the hardiness maps from. Now this is something Cornell puts together, and it's a lot of times it's for the farmers, but we can use it as gardeners. And this is the growing degree day calculator. So you can put in specifically your location by your zip code of your town. So I updated this to Batavia. And then you can look at, your temperatures you can change, your frost dates, and then it gives you your parameters. Okay, so over the last 15 or 30 years, it shows you the averages for your temperatures, as well as when your frost and freeze dates are. So a lot of people go by Memorial Day to plant, after that is pretty safe. And then trying to have stuff out of the garden or all harvested, especially your stuff that likes the warm weather, out by August, September. And I know this year I think they were looking at 15 October kind of being our first frost date. So if you're looking at, so we'll talk a little bit more about it too, is when you're looking at your seeds, if they have a longer growth where your harvest time is going to be around 100 or plus days, just in part of your plan is to whether you're going to have to protect it from your frost or your freeze. So having different things to cover. So garden location, you may already have a place identified as far as where you're going to put your garden, or you're looking at a new site. Okay, you may have a new spot that you want to look at. So some things to kind of look at are you getting enough sunlight? Are you getting the 6 to 8 hours of sun in that area, which is your sun pattern, to where you're going to be able to get ample growth. Soil testing, as most of you know, we do soil testing. So bring in those samples of the different locations of where you're looking at putting new beds to see what your pH is. So whether you have to amend it, or maybe that's really just not a good place for that type of plant, that you can be a little, more aware of when you're getting ready to plant. As well as, is it close to where are you going to have to haul water a long distance away to get there? Your tools, all that type of stuff as far as proximity. And fencing. If it's something that the deer are going to be nibbling on, are you going to be able to fence that area that you want to put the garden, or are you going to plant so much that you're not going to worry about if they browse a little bit. Okay, and I do have a little note about walnut trees. Some people still aren't aware that walnuts or even different types of nuts can still, with their roots spread out, even sometimes past the 50 feet, but just be aware of any debris that falls, the leaves and stuff can still cause problems with your soil as that jugalong is breaking down. Okay, my garden's not too far from ours too, so it's been working out okay though. Okay, so this is just to give you some ideas. Looking before we get started into the big meat and potatoes, there's all kinds of things you can do as far as your garden planning, different types of gardens. You can incorporate pathways, you can make rows, or you can mix them in. The boxes are a lot easier to get out when they're more narrower, versus when you have big box areas, you have to make room for pathways. And height is another thing that we'll talk a little bit about. You don't want all your height, where your sun is going over from east to west, and then you're blocking out some of your smaller vegetables. So in your plan, it's just really helpful so you know how tall your different plants are going to be. All right, so now is the perfect time. This last season to freshen your memory as far as how things went. What plants did you have pests with? Did you have diseases? Are you going to have to rotate your vegetables as far as, okay, you had some squash beetles in this area, so we're going to rotate them to a completely different area. Resistant seeds help for certain things, but they aren't completely foolproof. So if you keep putting them in the same spot, they still might be hindered in their growth. Okay. What are your goals? Do you want a high maintenance? Do you have a lot of time to spend a lot of time in your garden? Or do you want to just have something that you can just tinker with a little bit, but get a lot of produce out of it? So sometimes containers are good for that, as well as selecting the right seeds for those. And as well, how do you like to eat the vegetables that you're going to be harvesting? Do you want a certain amount and then you freeze them or you can them? Or do you want just enough to graze through the summer and then be satisfied with your crop? Because sometimes you don't have the storage room or the freezer space and everything. So, and this is where you have the paper, and at home if you have paper and a catalog, just kind of, if you want to work through it as we talk about it, you build your blueprints. So you take small sections of however garden, if you want to plan your big garden, or you want to break it down in smaller sections, kind of draw a little sketch as far as your area, your perimeter, and then start looking at what kind of things, list the type of vegetables or flowers or whatever it is that you want to plant, start making a list. So then you can start plugging those into your blueprint. Just keeping in mind, again, like what we talked about with the crop rotation, just to make sure that you're not having the same issues as the last season. And then leaving space, of course, for your rows, your distance between your rows. row length, of course, expected planting dates, and any other information that might be helpful. So, of course, the height of your plants, how wide they get. Yes, walking around them, having a good perimeter, so you can actually get down and you can do your weeding and get to those plants. So looking through the catalogs, when you're looking through whether they're heirloom or they're hybrid, you can pick out which plants are best to your liking. So hybrid are usually plants that are a little more resilient. They've gone through a lot of testing and been bred so that they have better fruit, maybe a little more robust color. They're a little sturdier through different pathogens, and your heirlooms are more of your open pollination, and in your catalogs you'll see they'll label the two difference. And then those are most of like your seeds. If you want to collect seeds, those are the ones that you want to plant so that you can recollect seeds at the end of the season. And let's see, and then sometimes they're not going to be as disease resistant as your hybrids. Okay, so going through your catalogs, your different varieties, the region. One thing that's good to look at is if there's seed companies in the Northeast, because in this area, a lot of them are bred with our temperature and our atmosphere here on the East Coast. If you're buying seeds and plants from California, they might not be as durable as the ones that you may be able to get from the East Coast, as well as, you know, the northern versus more of the southern plants, because they're used to a little bit of a longer growing season as well as a warmer climate. Okay, and natives, a lot of times we like all our beautiful, pretty flowers that go through the season. It's good for the pollinators to bring them to your gardens, as well as to remember putting in native plants. So whether it's around the edges of the perimeter of your garden, but to incorporate different natives to try to, you know, bring in, you know, more of the moths, because those are quite a few of your pollinators, as well as your other beneficial insects. Okay. So here's a little example of building a small box for your rows. So this can be incorporated in whatever type of layout that you have. You can make it the shape of your layout so it's easier. So if you have a 1 foot perimeter from your fence or whatnot, and then your spinach, you have so many feet of your spinach, and this is the date that you're going to look at putting it in and how many seeds you're going to use. And then your lettuce and your radishes. So the double asterisks, those rows, you'll be able to plant afterwards. So you'll be able to do succession planting. So once these are done producing the food that you need, then you can go ahead and replant those rows so that you have continuous vegetables throughout the whole season. As well as you'll see with the corn rows, those are in the back. So, you know, where the spinach is probably where you're getting most of your sun, because you want your corn in the back because she's going to get tall. And then you have it broken up 10 May, 25 May, and then 10 June, so that you're getting fresh corn throughout the whole season. You're not just planting everything at one time. You harvest everything and you're like, oh my goodness, I got to freeze all this food. So then at least you can, you know, break it up, and then you have fresh vegetables spread throughout. And that's an example that you can do while you're doing your picture and everything, as far as how you're going to lay your garden out. That's a little more of a breakdown. And when you go through the catalogs, a lot of that information will be in there, as far as how long it takes for the vegetable to produce, so you can start harvesting. How tall is it? You know, how wide are the leaves going to be, and the spacings. They'll give you that information, as well as the back of the seeds. I know, I'm sorry. But this stuff you guys are pretty much probably already aware of. It's interplanting. Okay, so you're growing 2 or more vegetables in the same space at the same time. So your rows are alternated, and you're mixing plants within a row and distributing throughout your garden, okay? Companion planting is their big safe space savers in your garden. So you want to plant them together, and then they serve a number of purposes for maximizing space. Okay, and then the relay planting is your staggering your installation so that you have, your succession throughout, as well as succession planting, I'm sorry. And that involves planting new species earlier, so you've got your mature plants when they're harvested. Okay, so for a 3-season garden, you can plant your cooler crops in the early spring, such as broccoli and peas. And then in the warmer season, you can, like tomatoes and peppers, your stuff that really likes the warmer temperatures. And then after that season is finished, then you should be able to put in more crops to finish up the season, cooler plants again. So your broccolis to finish it out. Okay. And then while you're planning, just think about the equipment that you're gonna need. So if you want to do a lot of salsa and tomatoes and everything, you're gonna need a lot more trellises, other equipment to be able to stabilize your vegetables. Maybe there's certain flowers along the edges that you're gonna need to trellis up. So it's good to make another list of the type of equipment that you don't have, as well as if there's special equipment that you may need for whether you're doing a new garden or you're doing your routine stuff, you're shifting stuff around. You might see something new out that you might be interested in. And the catalogs are great in the back of a lot of the catalogs, especially the gardeners. They'll have different tools and equipment that are out, especially for like starting seeds early and pinning your vegetables up and your flowers. Okay, seeds and plants. So we talked a little bit about with the catalog, all the information that they provide in the catalogs. They're a lot better a lot of times than the back of the packets that you buy in the stores. So it's good to sit down with you, start getting these in at the end of the season and make a list of all the different stuff that you would like to plant. And then if you find them locally and they're what you want, then you can update your list, and the catalog might have better information or more information as far as about that type of seeds, even though it's just taking a chance of the varieties being a little different. But organizing them, when you get your seed packets, you can use paper clips or rubber bands to do your different rows or your different stagger time, and put little pieces of paper in there to write your dates, just to help keep you organized. And then there's all kinds of different ways that you can organize your seeds, where you just take a cardboard box and then you can cut the cardboard into different sections to put your seeds in, and then you can label it easier, or you can use book or binders, however you keep what's easiest for you to make it comfortable for you to store your seeds and planting. So some things to keep in mind if you collect seeds, usually, of course, your heirlooms again, making sure they're, completely dry before you store them. But two, if you're using the packets that you're purchasing, usually the chances of them producing the next season, so if you keep them year after year and keep using them, the chances of them not producing seed goes down as you keep them longer. So usually use what you can or share what you can that first season, because your viability goes down the following years. They say about 2 years you can keep your seeds when you purchase them. After that, typically they don't, your plants don't start. And a recommendation too is that if you do that, you might want to start them early, see if they're actually viable, if they're coming up. Excuse me. So if you have to replace them, then you can do that. Then you can replace those seeds, and then you're not behind on your planting schedule. Okay. Because that's the last thing you want to do, is you've got a plan and then you can't get all the tomatoes that you want because they won't come up. And I know the November class was starting seeds early during the winter time. So if you want more information, I won't go into that too much here since it was already covered. There's a lot of good information about starting seeds and when you should do it, getting ready for the season. So it's very important, especially because there's some plants that take longer to grow out in the earth and everything, that you want to start them early because you're going to be far behind if you're waiting for that seed to germinate and then start producing plants outside in the weather. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to cover was the time period it talks about for harvest. Give yourself a couple extra weeks on the end of those, especially for planting, because sometimes depending if we have a really cool summer, sometimes things don't grow as vibrant as they would normally if we have a nice, warm, moist summer where you have to water more or you have to protect your seedlings. So sometimes it might take longer for them to produce food, and sometimes they'll produce a lot quicker if we have the right weather conditions. Okay, and this is just a little bit, it talks about, say, for example, beets, and this is most of this information is from the Purdue garden page that is on your green sheets and on your information. And so it just talks about, so beets, space rowing is 1 foot, space between plants 3 inches. It'll yield per 50 feet about 1 bushel. The amount of seeds or number of plants is about 1 ounce that you'll need. And then the depth, because the depth is really important of how deep you put your seeds, because you want them to be able to make it above the ground. So you don't want to put them in too deep and you don't want to put them in too shallow, so your bigger plants are falling over. And then your time period of when's best to plant, and then the time period before the first harvest. And the books in between the back of the seed packets, sometimes those varies. The catalog books are really good because they're a little more specific on when they count their days from when, if it's right when it goes into the ground and how long it takes to germinate. So that's why you still have to, it's kind of a guidance, not really a dead set time period on how long that they take to get the fruits. And then some more examples just of the different type of bed layouts, the different patterns that you can do. You don't have to stay with the standard rows, big farm field. And so it's all up to your creativity. Okay, so now we'll go through some stuff that is just common for normal gardening stuff, but just reminder type stuff as far as fertilization and soil pH. If there's any question, we do soil testing here at the extension, and vegetables grow best between 6.0 and 6.8 pH, and there's different ways to amend and to fertilize. And the big thing to emphasize is to always, with your soil, make sure you're using the right fertilizer and then follow the directions specifically. And the extension can give you all kinds of recommendations. When you do your initial, doesn't mean you have to do that continually. That amount, it'll change depending on how your soil's absorbing it and how much rain and everything that we're seeing for that season. And just some pointers for preparing for the spring. Reloosening that soil up to about 6 inches. You don't want to go too much deeper, because then you're going to start breaking up, messing up that good bacteria, that biosphere that's in your soil. And then just some pointers as far as whether you can ball it together or if it crumbles, and making sure you're not planting a little bit too early or prepping the soil too early so that you lose any good nutrients. Okay, and then of course, use whatever is easiest for you to loosen up that soil, because sometimes we can't all get down on our knees and scrape it up. So the planting of the seeds, again, just making sure that we don't plant too deep our seeds, and that we're putting a nice light cover so that they can push up. if you're happen to get a lot of heavy rains where it's starting to pack back down, you might have to put a little bit of mulch kind of to keep it from those spring heavy rains of patting it down too much to try to protect them. Okay, and then as well in your soil, adding some chopped straw, grass clippings, something else for a thin layer to try to protect your seeds. Okay. Okay, setting out plants, just a reminder to do it gradually in the spring. You know, when the sun gets too hot and they've been in your basement or you've just gotten them out of the greenhouse, you don't want them to start wilting on you too soon. You know, whether it's too chilly or it's too much sun at first. So put them in a shady spot, let them to acclimatize to the outside, and then bring them in at night if it gets too cold. And then do that for a few weeks until it's time to plant. And then they should be pretty much climatized so that they can survive good in the garden. Okay. Frost danger, as we talked just a little bit about, is making sure that you have a plan. You know, we plant at the end of May and everything looks good, and then all of a sudden we get one of those cold snaps come through. You know, keep an eye on the weather. You cover what you can. You use some kind of blankets. Try to stay away from anything metal or plastic to cover them, and then to make sure the stuff comes off as soon as the sun comes up in the morning, so that the sun is warming everything up and being able to take care of them. Because if you cover it too much through half the day, you might lose them to wilting, and all that hard work is pretty much put to the wayside. Weed control. As you get your garden set and all of the weeds are starting to poke their little heads up after everything's set, the best time to get them is when they're first starting to come up, when they're tiny, so you can pick them up. And part of your plan is to set every other day or every so many days, you go out and you do your little weeding and stuff to try to keep control. And then after a short period of time, probably a couple weeks, where your plants are starting to come up and you know where they are, then you can start mulching around them to help keep your weeds under control and to help in your pathways. So whether you use straw or you use a mulch and you get it from a clean source so it doesn't contaminate your vegetable garden or your flowers, and that'll help you with the weeding quite significantly. I know sometimes newspapers you wet them down and you keep them around certain things, and it helps as well. Okay. And a little bit more about mulching. You really don't want to go too much over 4 inches, so probably a good base around 3-4 inches along the rows, but around the plants. Make sure that the roots can breathe. And then the different plastic, probably seen it like in strawberries and stuff, the black plastic goes down, strawberries or asparagus or something goes in the ground, and that helps pretty good with keeping the moisture in. It's just something to keep an eye as you have mulches to make sure that your area, you have good drainage, because sometimes that mulch will hold in too much water and then your roots will get waterlogged. So just keeping an eye for that so you have some good drainage. Okay, and then as your vegetables are coming up and you see how much spacing you have, like carrots, the seeds are very tiny, and so you kind of spread them out, and then you have to thin them out. And it'll go for different vegetables. So part of your plan is picking out what days you're going to do that, as you keep an eye on how they're growing. And then thinning them, because you don't want all these little tiny carrots at the end of harvest. You want some nice big robust ones. So just making sure with the distance that they're supposed to be apart from each other so they have room to grow, that you thin and then kind of pack that soil back in, or water, and that'll help that soil pack back in around your vegetables. Okay, insect and disease control. The best way to do it is to make sure that you identify what you have a problem with. And here at the Extension, we can help you with identifying any type of issues or problems that you have. Sometimes we get where folks come in and then they just dump a certain pesticide all over all their vegetables. And that way you're killing the pollinators, you're killing all kinds of other good insects that are beneficial to your plants growing. So recommend you let us help you identify what your pest or your disease is. And then we can help you as far as recommending different products to use if that's what is deemed necessary. But there's a lot of things that you can do without going to that resort as well, whether it's vacuuming or picking up like the Japanese beetles, removing certain things. Other stuff needs a little extra help. But the important thing is making sure that you follow the instructions. The instructions on the back will say specifically what it's used for, and that you follow those instructions when you're using it in your gardens. And the best part is harvest and storage. So setting the plan as you see how things are producing, and make sure you're checking every morning so you can harvest all your vegetables. And you've already known from your plan that how you're going to freeze or preserve them or use them as you go. And we have the fortune of having master preserver in the Extension as well. They can give you wonderful ideas on how to preserve any of those fruits, vegetables, different things that you want to keep so that you have something that you can eat all through winter and until the next harvest starts producing. So here's just an example of carrots. It just kind of tells you carrots, the harvest spring carrots before the hot weather, and fall planted carrots should be harvested before, of course, the first moderate spring. And then for storage, wash roots, trim the tops off and place them in perforated plastic bags and store in the refrigerator or like a cold cellar or a pit, and they last for up to 2 to 4 months. And so there's all kinds of wonderful information between the EDU sites as well as our master preserver. And then in close, finishing up the season. The big thing is keeping notes on all the issues, ideas that you may have for next season, something different that you would like to try. Maybe you saw something in a new seed catalog or something else that came out that may have piqued your interest. And just cleaning up your tools and letting things finish. Just some reminders is if you have diseases or other issues with your plants, make sure that you throw those away. You don't recycle those in compost at all, because that some of them, your compost may not get hot enough to break those pathogens down. So you want to discard those. And then all the other good stuff you can put in your compost and have that hopefully broken down and ready for the next season or two, and how you rotate your compost piles. And then take care of your tools and have everything ready for the next season, and then start your plan all over again for the next season. And then here's our resources, which are all listed on your page. Purdue is the main resource I used, and then of course PennState as well as University of New Hampshire. And on their page for University of New Hampshire, they have podcasts and they have little cheat sheets for pretty much anything you would want to know about gardening. So it's a great resource. And then of course, all the pictures I tried to note as far as where I got those from on bing.com. Okay, I'm a little early for questions, but
That's okay. We're good, Denise. If anybody has a question here in the room, you can ask Denise now. If you're on Zoom, you can unmute to ask a question, or you can put it in the chat. So does anybody have questions for Denise?
Can I go back to the?
One thing I do want to mention, Denise mentioned if you need soil testing done, your local extension can do it. We can do soil pH in our office with the master gardeners, but if you need help with fertility, like your phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, that we would recommend you send out to a soil testing lab, but we can help you find that information and get it for you. Questions for Denise? It was a lot of information.
Can I add in a lot of tidbits?
Sure.
Tidbits, okay. GMO seeds are mostly created for farmers. So chances are in your catalogs and stuff, you're not going to see a whole lot of GMO seeds because they're mostly developed for mass amounts of crop production. But a lot of them have pledges. A lot of the seed companies that do collect and send them out and do the research, they will label them if they're GMO so that you're aware of those type of seeds, especially if you're concerned about GMO seeds. Now the heirloom and the hybrids are usually specifically named in the catalogs so that you can differentiate, especially if you like collecting seeds at the end of the season. For pathogens, then they say disease resistant to a certain pathogen, just keep in mind, it's a good recommendation still to protect those plants. So you put them in the same spots where you had a really hard time with powdery mildew and they're supposed to be resistant. If you get it again, they're only resistant to a certain amount. So you have to still do all those protection things by rotating them, you know, keeping whatever litter away from the edges to make sure that they don't get those pathogens again. So even though it says resistant, doesn't mean it's completely protected from getting those pathogens again.
Denise, I got a couple of comments here. So thank you for this. One of the things that I did wrong was plant way too many vegetable seeds during my first season of having a garden. Using proper planning would have saved me hours and hours of labor time. So thanks for collecting all this that we can reference. Donna has a question. Any recommendations on who can sharpen tools? Hand pruners.
Sometimes your little shops that fix lawnmowers, they usually, because they sharpen blades and they do other maintenance for your lawnmowers, they may be a good place to start is your lawnmower maintenance locations, because they have the tools to be able to sharpen them. I've seen stuff where people just have a bucket with maybe a little used motor oil. So at the end of the season, so they don't rust, they stick them
with some sand.
and some sand. And so that, you know, make sure there's no cracks, of course, or anything in there. But for sharpening, that's probably where I would start if you don't feel comfortable with doing it yourself.
Yeah, I don't think we have any, we don't have a list. Michael has a suggestion for anyone looking into companion planting. He said Jessica Walliser, Walliser, has a good science-based book on companion planting.
Yes, and online, a lot of the universities are really, PennState, University of New Hampshire, really a lot of good information as far as who gets along with who provides food for the other vegetables and stuff. So like, there's a few of them that you can pretty much, beans and peas, you can put with just about anybody, and they're going to give nitrogen to your soil and help out. And corn, they'll climb up the corn. They won't pull your corn down, but you'll have instant trellises.
And that's the basis of the Three Sisters garden, is the corn, beans, and the pumpkins. So the corn grows up, the beans climb up the corn, they provide the nitrogen, and the pumpkins shade the ground, so you have less weeds. And we would all like less weeds.